Hi guys, if you don't know me, I'm Dan, and today I'm going to be continuing our series on living God's story, where we've been looking at some of the characters in the Bible and learning about some of the stuff that they have done. And I was thinking that when we look at some of these characters, we can often think that they seem extra godly or somehow better than us. I mean, not many of us nowadays go around performing miracles or leading armies, do we? But God's very good at showing us that these people are flawed human beings, just like us, and they have fears and they get tempted. Yeah, God's just good at putting stories in the Bible to help us realise that and see the similarities between ourselves and some of these people. So today we're going to be looking at Elijah, and when I say Elijah, the first Bible story that comes into your head might be the one where Elijah is duelling with the prophets of Baal, and the prophets of Baal try to call down fire from their God to burn their sacrifice, and nothing happens. And then Elijah calls down fire from God, and he sends it and burns up all the meat and the altar, the stones of the altar itself, and all the water, which is pretty crazy, and a very big miracle that we might think about when we hear Elijah. But today I'm going to be talking about what happened right after that, and so we are going to be jumping straight into 1 Kings 19 verses 1 to 8. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a message to Elijah saying, "So may the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." Then he was afraid, and he arose and ran for his life, and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. So in these verses we have Ahab and Jezebel, who are the king and queen in Israel at that time, and Jezebel is obviously very angry at Elijah, because you might remember at the end of the story of Elijah's duel with the prophets of Baal, he kills all of the prophets of Baal, which makes Jezebel not very pleased with him. And so in this story she sends a messenger to him to say that she's going to kill Elijah. At this point in the story we might be remembering what happened just before this, how Elijah called down the fire of God, and we might be rubbing our hands together and thinking, oh, Jezebel's in for it now, can't wait to see what Elijah does this time. But we actually might be a bit disappointed by what happened, because Elijah runs away, and not any small distance either. He runs a very, very long way away. All the way from Jezreel, up here in Israel, down to Beersheba at the very south of Judah. So Elijah was obviously trying to get as far away from Jezebel as he could. Something interesting here is that normally when Elijah travels long distances in the Bible, it's always preceded by the word of the Lord, because the Lord is telling him to go somewhere and Elijah does it. But in this passage it seems like Elijah is just acting on his own impulses and his own fear, and we don't hear about the word of the Lord for a while. And so it kind of seems like Elijah has completely forgotten about God for this short period of time and is just terrified for his life, which is surprising considering the massive miracle that Elijah just saw God do. So now reading on from verse 4. But he himself, that's Elijah, went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he asked that he might die, saying, It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers. And here Elijah does sound really depressed, doesn't he? Like he's just come to the end of everything, or that's what he feels like. And the interesting thing is that he says, I am no better than my fathers. That kind of suggests that before all this happened, he thought he was better than his fathers, which is just what we were talking about at the start, about thinking that these people were somehow better than us. So this kind of suggests that Elijah did think he was better than other people in some way, which is maybe why God put him in this situation. Maybe God is using this situation, or will use this situation, to help him grow in the understanding that it's God who gives him the strength to get past his struggles in his day-to-day life. And then from verse 5, and he lay down and slept under a broom tree, and behold, an angel touched him and said to him, Arise and eat. And he looked, and behold, there was at his head a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate and drank and lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came again a second time and touched him and said, Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you. And he arose and ate and drank, and went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. So this is the point where God sends help. Elijah is at the lowest of low points, and his own strength has failed him, and so now he just has to fall back on God's strength, and so God sends his angel to give him some food and encourage him. And what's interesting here is that Elijah doesn't respond fully until the second prompting of the angel. The angel has to come down twice and to offer him food. He kind of knows that God's strength is there for him to take, but he's not taking the initiative and stepping out and stepping into God's strength, which is there for him. And then the other thing is, when he does go, if you notice, by the strength of that food, he goes 40 days and 40 nights, which is obviously not something we can do just in human strength. So when we look at that, when we read this passage, we can tell that that is God's strength in Elijah, and not just him as a strong man doing something like that, which would be impossible for him to do. So I was thinking about this passage, and I was thinking about what similarities there are in my own life. And if you know me well, you know that I'm very fearful when it comes to talking to other people. And yeah, so that's a bit like Elijah with his fear of Jezebel, although that's a bit more well-founded, given that she was going to kill him. But anyway, yes, I am scared of talking to people. And one situation I can think of is that there's a boy in my school who, as soon as I started school, which was almost 2 years ago now, I noticed him, and he's always just sitting alone at lunch times and breaks, and I thought I really should go and talk to him, and I prayed about it, and I still haven't gone and talked to him after all this time. And I think that's an example of God's strength being there and me not stepping out into it. And another time I can think of is when I had an agreement with my parents about how late I was going to bed, and I was dishonouring that agreement. I was going to bed later than I should have, and I knew I needed to talk to my dad about it and confess it to him, and I just didn't have the courage for it. I was too weak in my humanness. And so I prayed about it, and I prayed about it a lot, and just like Elijah in the Bible, the first couple of times God prompted me about it, I didn't do anything, but then eventually I talked to my dad about it, and it was a great feeling, like a weight had been lifted off me. And yeah, God gave me the strength to carry on in the discipline of not staying up super late, so that's good. So I guess where we can be applying this story from Elijah's life to our lives is in similar situation to these, and yours will probably differ a bit from mine because you'll all have different fears and different temptations, but I think all of us sometimes feel God's prompting in different areas of our life and God kind of poking us in the ribcage. And in these times we can remember that we don't have to be extra godly or somehow better than everyone else in order to do these things, because it's through God's strength that we can step out in faith and see things happen and obey God's calling and even see miracles happen, like we heard Jacob talk about back in November, I think. Anyway, we can have fun discussing all this in a bit when I see you. Bye!